Imagine a world where every conversation could be a coded message, where your neighbor might not be who they claim to be. This was not the realm of fiction, but the stark reality of the mid-20th century, a time that history now remembers as the Cold War era. This was a period like no other, a time when the world's two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were locked in an icy standoff. The stakes were high, the tension palpable, and the world watched with bated breath as these two giants engaged in a battle that was as silent as it was deadly. This was not a war fought with tanks and soldiers, but with secrets and spies. It was a time of double agents and covert operations, of coded communications and hidden microphones. This was the age of espionage. Espionage, in its simplest form, is the practice of obtaining confidential information without the permission of the holder of the information. But during the Cold War, it was so much more. It was the eyes and ears of the superpowers, their hidden weapon in a war that was waged in the shadows. Every country, every government, every individual was a potential pawn in this Nandamiye. Espionage was the silent wheel that kept the Cold War machine turning. And yet, for all its importance, the world of espionage remained shrouded in mystery. The men and women who risked their lives to gather intelligence were not celebrated heroes, but faceless entities, their identities and their deeds known only to a select few. This was a world of secrets and lies, of trust and betrayal. It was a world where information was power, and power was everything. It was a world where the line between friend and foe was blurred, and where one wrong move could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Welcome to the unseen war of the Cold War era. It all began in the aftermath of World War II. As the smoke cleared, a new kind of conflict was taking shape. This was not a battle of bullets and bombs, but of secrets and subterfuge. In the shadows of a world recovering from the ravages of war, a new kind of soldier was being recruited. These were not the strapping young men marching off to battle, but the silent, unseen warriors of the Cold War. From the bustling streets of Berlin to the quiet corridors of Washington, spies were being trained, their identities concealed, their missions cloaked in layers of intrigue. These secret soldiers were the front line of a war that was fought not in trenches, but in the minds and hearts of men and women across the globe. They were the spies, the agents, the double agents. Their weapons were not guns, but information. Their battleground was not a field, but the world stage. This was the birth of a new kind of warfare. In the shadows, spies began to operate. As the Cold War escalated, the world's two superpowers found themselves locked in a silent, invisible struggle. A war fought not with bullets and bombs, but with information and subterfuge. In the heart of this clandestine conflict were the spies. These were not the glamorous, cocktail-sipping secret agents of Hollywood fame. No, these were everyday men and women, living double lives, their true identities shrouded in secrecy. They were diplomats, journalists, secretaries, and even housewives who, under their ordinary facades, carried out some of the most extraordinary tasks. Imagine being a spy in the midst of the Cold War, living a life fraught with danger and uncertainty. Every conversation could be a trap, every new face a potential enemy. The stakes were high. The smallest slip could mean imprisonment or worse, death. Yet, despite the risks, these unsung heroes carried on, driven by duty, ideology, or perhaps just the thrill of living a life on the edge. These spies uncovered secrets that shaped the course of history. They stole scientific discoveries, infiltrated enemy territories, and sabotaged strategic plans. They provided their governments with invaluable insights, giving them the upper hand in this delicate game of chess. Consider the case of Oleg Gordievsky, a high-ranking KGB officer who defected to Britain. His information exposed Soviet spy rings in the West and even helped to avert a nuclear war. Or take the Cambridge Five, a group of British citizens who spied for the Soviets. Their espionage activities sent shockwaves through the British establishment, exposing the vulnerability of even the most secure institutions. But let's not forget the human cost. Spies lived in constant fear of being exposed, their lives and the lives of their loved ones always in danger. They paid a heavy price for their courage, with many losing their freedom, their families, or their lives. These were the people who fought the Cold War behind the scenes. They were the silent warriors, whose deeds, though often unacknowledged, played a crucial role in shaping the world as we know it today. In this world of shadows, a spy's best friend was their tools. The Cold War, a time of tension and uncertainty, was a breeding ground for subterfuge and espionage. The unseen warriors of this conflict were not armed with conventional weapons, but with ingenious tools designed to gather, conceal, and transmit information. These tools, varied and innovative, served as silent accomplices in the clandestine operations that shaped the fate of nations. One of the most iconic tools of the trade was the miniaturized camera. Cleverly disguised as everyday objects, a pack of cigarettes, a pen, even a button on a coat, these cameras allowed spies to capture and document critical information without arousing suspicion. Then, there were the tools designed for covert communication. Invisible ink, used to write hidden messages that could only be read under special light, was a favorite. The coded message, a staple of the spy's toolkit, turned innocuous phrases into instructions for covert operations. Of course, we mustn't forget the bugs. These tiny listening devices, some no larger than a coin, could be hidden almost anywhere. From the hollow of a tree to the inside of a phone, these bugs captured whispered conversations and secret meetings, transmitting them to eager ears miles away. The tools didn't end with information gathering. Espionage also required tools for escape and evasion. A lipstick tube could conceal a single-shot pistol. An umbrella could fire a deadly poison pellet. Even a pair of glasses could be transformed into a tool of escape, concealing a fine wire saw in its frame. These tools, though simple in appearance, were the result of meticulous design and engineering. They allowed the spies to operate in plain sight, their actions hidden behind the facade of normalcy. Without these tools, the spy was just another face in the crowd. With them, they became invisible warriors, their actions shaping the course of history. With these tools, the spies carried out their unseen warfare. Their actions, hidden in the shadows, left an indelible mark on the world, forever changing the landscape of international relations. And though the Cold War has ended, the legacy of these tools and the spies who wielded them lives on. But not every mission was a success. Espionage during the Cold War was a game of cat and mouse, filled with triumphs that shaped the course of history and failures that left indelible marks on the world stage. Let's delve into some of these notable moments. One triumph that stands out is the successful extraction of Soviet officer Oleg Penkovsky. Often regarded as one of the West's most valuable assets, Penkovsky provided critical information that helped defuse the Cuban Missile Crisis. His intelligence allowed the United States to stand toe-to-toe with the Soviets, ultimately leading to a peaceful resolution. But the world of espionage is not always filled with victories. Let's take a look at the infamous U-2 incident. In the spring of 1960, U-2 pilot Gary Powers was tasked with a high-altitude reconnaissance mission over the Soviet Union. However, the mission went awry when Powers' plane was shot down. He was captured, tried, and convicted of espionage, a grave failure that heightened tensions between the two superpowers. Another noteworthy failure was the Bay of Pigs invasion. In 1961, the CIA backed an ill-fated attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's regime in Cuba. The mission ended in disaster, with the rebel forces crushed and the United States' role in the plot exposed to the world. This failure not only embarrassed the US, but also pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union, altering the dynamics of the Cold War. Yet, there were also unsung triumphs like Operation Gold, an ambitious project by the CIA and British intelligence to tap into landline communication of the Soviet military in East Berlin. For almost a year, this operation quietly collected valuable Soviet secrets until it was eventually discovered and shut down. And so, the pendulum of Cold War espionage swung between triumph and failure. Each success, each blunder, shaped the strategies, the politics, and the very nature of this unseen war. These were the high stakes of Cold War espionage. As suddenly as it had begun, the Cold War came to an end. Just as swiftly as the Iron Curtain had descended, it was lifted, revealing a world forever changed by decades of covert operations, secret missions, and quiet diplomacy. The end of the Cold War didn't signal a complete end to espionage activities, but it did bring about a seismic shift in the world of intelligence. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, a new world order was ushered in. The bipolar world of East and West was replaced by a more nuanced, multipolar world. This meant that the targets of espionage shifted. No longer was it a game solely between the United States and the Soviet Union. Instead, the playing field expanded to include emerging powers and non-state actors. But perhaps the most immediate impact was the exposure of many spies. As the dust settled, secrets that had been buried deep within the annals of espionage were brought to the surface. Spies who'd spent their lives in the shadows found themselves thrust into the spotlight, their true identities revealed, and their covert actions scrutinized. The end of the Cold War marked the beginning of a new era of transparency, accountability, and at times, public trials. One such example was the case of Aldrich Ames, a high-ranking CIA officer. Ames was unmasked as a double agent who had been spying for the Soviets. His betrayal had led to the execution of at least 10 Soviet intelligence officers who were working for the United States. His exposure in 1994 rocked the intelligence community and served as a stark reminder of the treacherous undercurrents of the Cold War. In the end, the conclusion of the Cold War didn't mean the end of espionage. Instead, it signaled a transformation in the way intelligence was gathered and used. It was a time of reckoning for many, a time of change, and a time of new beginnings. The unseen war was finally brought into the light. The Cold War may be over, but its legacy lives on. The Cold War was a time of intense secrecy and subterfuge, a period that fundamentally reshaped the world of espionage. And while the ideological battle between the East and West may have cooled, the tactics and techniques birthed from this era continue to shape our intelligence activities today. The Cold War era was a crucible for technological innovation in the field of espionage. Satellites, covert listening devices, and encrypted communication systems were all developed out of necessity during this time. Today, these are considered standard tools in the intelligence arsenal, with advancements continuing to evolve at a rapid pace. But let's not forget, despite all the technological marvels, the role of human intelligence was, and still is, irreplaceable. The Cold War saw spies from both sides risking their lives to gather information. Their courage and cunning laid the groundwork for modern-day intelligence operatives who continue to operate under the same principles of discretion, courage, and quick thinking. The Cold War also underscored the value of intelligence gathering in maintaining national security and global stability. The world came to understand that knowledge is power, And in the world of international relations, that power can mean the difference between peace and conflict. Moreover, the Cold War's legacy can be seen in our international laws and treaties. The aftermath of the espionage activities during this period led to the creation of stricter regulations and a more defined international legal framework for intelligence activities. But perhaps the most important legacy of Cold War espionage is the enduring understanding that in the shadows of diplomacy, the silent war of intelligence continues. It's a war fought not with bullets and bombs, but with information and subterfuge. A war where victory is not always clear and the battle lines are continually redrawn. The echoes of the Cold War can still be heard in the world of espionage today. From the tools we use, to the laws that govern us, to the very nature of intelligence gathering itself, the Cold War's influence is undeniable. Its legacy lives on, reminding us of the importance of vigilance, innovation, and above all, the pursuit of truth. From the ashes of World War II, a new kind of warfare was born. As we have seen, this was not a war fought on battlefields with armies and tanks, but in secret meetings, coded messages, and the minds of men and women who risked everything for their countries. We journeyed back to the birth of Cold War espionage, a time when the world was still reeling from the devastation of the Second World War. In the uncertain landscape of this new world order, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, and their rivalry would form the backdrop for the clandestine operations that were to come. We delved into the shadows, where spies operated under the cloak of secrecy, their identities hidden, their actions unseen. These were the foot soldiers of the Cold War, gathering intelligence, sabotaging enemy operations, and sometimes paying the ultimate price for their service. We explored the tools of the trade, the gadgets and techniques that spies used to carry out their missions. From invisible ink to miniature cameras, these tools were as varied and inventive as the spies who used them. We reflected on the triumphs and failures of Cold War espionage, the successful operations that provided vital information, and the disastrous ones that cost lives and reputations. Each success and failure shaped the course of the Cold War and had far-reaching consequences. We looked at the end of the Cold War, a time of change and uncertainty. The fall of the Berlin Wall marked the beginning of a new era, but the legacy of Cold War espionage lived on. And finally, we considered this legacy, the enduring impact of Cold War espionage on our world today. From the intelligence agencies that continue to operate, to the popular culture that celebrates the daring and intrigue of the spy world, the influence of this unseen war is still felt today. This has been the story of the unseen war of the Cold War era. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows.